Hi, Mike from the Fulcrum. Just a short one today because I know I tend to blather on at length. Anyway, plan A today was to replace the front grille on my Miata sports car. This a custom front grille, so I had to make one up. But the weather decided to change its mind. Cold, overcast, rain coming in, wind. Not the best weather to be working on your car outside. So I figured plan B, go grab a coffee. Maybe listen to the radio down by the trail and watch the parade of life go by. Old folks, young folks, couples out on their first date, married couples obviously on their last date, little kids with their first bike with training wheels toddling by. Great fun. Old guys with really old dogs walking along about 2 kilometers an hour. Good stiff wind to blow them all away. But blessing for being out here in this weather, getting some fresh air. I also see a lot of middle-aged and younger men wandering around aimlessly. All could be in the best of spirits, sitting on park benches, gazing off into space. And it hit me that we've lost a lot of traditional male spaces where men used to get together and just trade what's going on in their lives, sometimes over a beer, sometimes a coffee. Didn't have to be all very important. But in today's society, the middle-aged male appears to be a vanishing or almost invisible demographic. It seems odd in these days of where everyone's oppressed and every group gets a soapbox to stand on, much coverage given to the tiniest of groups that a lot of them I never even knew existed until I started watching uh, traditional media again. For example, I put on CBC Radio, which used to have a lot of great commentary and interviews. So it's a public broadcaster here in Canada, been around forever. The main reason for being was to help tie the country together, particularly during the war years. Stories from coast to coast. Often gave great coverage, typically unbiased one way or the other. Like, for example, if they're going to interview during an election cycle, they'd have liberals, conservatives, NDP, and even some of the fringe groups all on the same panel, all arguing the same issues to give you an idea as to what's going on and where everybody stood. Not so much anymore. Seems a very biased, one-sided operation. Put on NPR and the same thing, much the same type of coverage. Men, particularly middle-aged men of all race, colors, and creed, were invisible. Listened for over an hour, and I heard all kinds of interesting stories about single moms of just about every culture and every gender persuasion. You get into some dicey waters there as to how people are to be addressed. There was all kinds of coverage on indigenous cooking, various cultures coming in and their way of life, and how challenging it is to try and maintain one's roots in a new world. Interesting stuff, to be sure. But nothing that would be riveting to me as the middle-aged male. Whereas there used to be a lot of coverage, for example, for every time they interviewed someone of one persuasion, they'd interview one on the opposite side to balance it out. So if they were talking about issues between men and women, they would interview men, they would interview women, and try and come to some consensus. At least balance it out, but not so much anymore. I noticed that as well when I was out last night, went to a hockey game, had a great time, great game. Afterwards, myself and 3 other men went out and had nachos, grabbed a couple beer at a local pub. We were there at almost 11 o'clock, just shooting the breeze over what's going on in our lives. But the common consensus towards the end is, we have to get together and do this again. Do you realize it's been 4 years since we last got together like this? 4 years. Seemed unbelievable. And I thought back about it. Well, the last time I saw one of them was about 6 months ago, and it was the typical, hey, how are you? How's the wife? How's the kids? How's your mother-in-law? How's the new job? You like that new car? How's the truck? And a lot of these big gaps in getting together are often the result of the end of a marriage. The social cohesion, often a matter of families getting together. Once the split, the families divide into two camps, and quite often the male is set adrift, fend for themselves, and quite often not very successfully. The rates of suicide amongst divorced men and addictions is quite high. It becomes an issue where life is unbearable. And because there are so few services that men can reach out to, it's not that men don't want to talk, it's the fact that no one truly listens to them. And it's not the old, well, buck up and get on with it. No, it's basically because every time you talk about these things, the main aspect from therapy appears to be, it's all your fault. And sadly, the main reason for the lack of these get-togethers is the fact that quite often these individuals have gone through a change in their relationship status. The death of a spouse, divorce particularly. Once that divorce happens, families divide into two camps. Primarily, the husband ends up with issues with visitation rights, having many more bills to pay. He has to look after his own situation as well as child support and alimony and that kind of thing, which is a real nasty kettle of fish. So the men lose contact with one another. And unless you bump into them at the grocery store, in a parking lot somewhere, going into a coffee shop, your interaction with them is very limited compared to what it used to be. So, in reality, men have to look after themselves. And part of that is looking after your brother. Bit of a brotherhood, tribe as it were. So if there's somebody that you used to hang around with, pal around with, you haven't heard from in a while, drop a line. Give them a phone call. Contact them on Facebook. Send them a tweet. Whatever. Arrange to meet up. Have coffee. Go for a walk. Go fishing. Go for a bike ride. Anything to get you out and about. It might mean your survival or theirs. Because it appears very clearly that we are a disappearing demographic. Not only disappearing, we're also expected to be deaf, dumb, and blind. If we speak out, it is basically seen as an attack on every other group under the sun, which in most cases simply isn't true.